excellent advocate, an excellent advocate. Pay for him out of your end of it, and the division shouldn't be 50-50. Maybe it should be 40-60, but maybe that's for another venue to decide. A court might want to decide that, or let the city council pay this gentleman's fee, whatever it may, not the owners. This gentleman is excellent. He does not support the views of housing providers on AB 1506 or AB 1505, or even his interpretation of the San Jose case that involved upholding special zoning. In that case, the Supreme Court carved out the Palmer decision and didn't touch it. Said Palmer is settled good law, and they had a chance to knock down Palmer, but the Supreme Court said no, we will not do it. That's the decision. They had the chance to do it, but they did do it in the Supreme Court decision. Owners that provide housing should not have to pay for the exceptional, outstanding, and excellent advocate on behalf of tenants. It's not fair, it's not right, it's not American, it's not transparent, and it's certainly
Mr.
not
Millman,
due process.
If you will address the chair and the chair only.
Yes, it's not fair.
Thank you for your professional courtesy.
Right, always be professional here.
Thank you.
So please don't ever suggest to people that provide housing that you're interested in being fair, because the elimination of what is bedrock to us, Costa-Hawkins and other laws being advocated all the time by this fine gentleman, Mr. Chair, is inconsistent with everything that the housing providers, and to ask us to pay us for this is terrible. I could give you an analogy, but the analogy is so horrific and terrible that I couldn't sleep at night. Thank you for your time. Let somebody else pay his fare. He deserves his money, but don't put it on the back. Don't put it on the back of landlords. That's not right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Millman.
And Mr. Chair,
Thank
I
you.
have a sense of humor too,
Thank
but
you.
I'm not smiling.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Millman.
not laughing.
Thank you, Mr. Millman. Okay, are there any discussion? I have Commissioner Terosis. Do you have comments you'd like to make?
You didn't take it away from my last.
Oh, I didn't. Never mind.
But I have plenty to say about this. I don't
Okay.
need to now, though.
Seeing no other comments, I would like to say thank you again for Mr. Augusta for doing the work that he has done and for providing the report that you did this evening. Thank you. Moving on to item number 12C, resolutions in support of AB 982 and AB 1506.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
given Mr. Augusta's report, and given I know the interest of other commissioners in these issues and the fact that we've made ourselves very familiar with these issues, I certainly move that we could waive the report and go to the item for, well, we've got some speakers, but for,
Agree.
yeah, for discussion and a motion. I just move we waive the report if it's not needed by any of the other commissioners. I know.
Second.
I mean, I know Stephen put work into it, but
There's been a first and a second. I understand the hour of the evening is running late.
well, just we're very familiar with the bills. Yeah.
I understand. I have the floor. And what I'd like to say is I understand that it's late in the day. I understand there's a first and a second, and we are in the discussion, and my point would be that I believe we have a duty and an obligation to provide discussion about these items, which I know that we will do, and that's what you're asking for, but I just think that discussing the issue, putting it out there so people who are listening, people who are in the audience can hear what is being said and what the issues are would be serves a good public service. So there's been a first and a second. If there's no more discussion, we can call for a vote.
I just want to respond quickly as one of the seconders. I think that, we've all read the report, we've all devoted a substantial amount of time, and I think that there's no risk that the public will not be informed of what we are deliberating on, particularly given that the materials are freely available here and online. So,
And I just want to say I wouldn't have made the motion to forego the report had Mr. Augusta not previewed these bills already so well.
Right.
And very briefly.
I mean, so there are a multitude of reasons to support it.
Okay, well, having said that,
May I?
yes, go ahead.
Perhaps a compromise could be reached if staff could just give a extremely brief intro to the item and limit
Call
it
the
to
question. Call the question. No report.
No, I motioned and moved and seconded.
Okay,
You can always vote no.
there's been a motion to move and a second, so I will call the vote.
Commissioner Flora,
Yes.
Commissioner Phyllis,
Yes.
Commissioner Foster,
that. No.
Commissioner Trosis,
No.
and Commissioner Duran.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay.
Okay, can I have a,
Can I make a motion? I move for a condensed staff report. Is that possible? Great, fabulous.
okay, there's been a first and a second for a condensed report. Another roll call vote, please.
You just want to do a voice vote.
Voice vote. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, ayes have it. For the, let's see, what do I have first? Mr. Lewis, go ahead and present your report.
Well, my report was already planned to be so short that it would have been over by now. That's all right. As Mr. Augusta already mentioned, there are two bills in this item. One is AB 982, which would amend the Ellis Act to require a one-year notice period to terminate a tenancy for withdrawal under the Ellis Act. The other is AB 1506, which would repeal the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. Because both of these bills would restore to the board the authority originally granted to it by the board, by the voters with the passage of the initial rent control law, staff recommends that the board consider, after hearing from the public, whether to enact resolutions which are attached to the packet in support of those bills. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 speakers. Are there any questions regarding the staff report before we go to speakers? Seeing none. The first speaker I have is Commissioner Brown. You will have 2 minutes when you are ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to acknowledge myself as the bad apple landlord. That's what I'm going to call myself when I come up here. The bad apple landlord. I'm getting really tired of sitting here. I already know how you're going to support this, so I don't have to say anything on it. And I also want to acknowledge that it's really busy, and you've got a lot on your agenda, and it's late. But there are people who have been sitting here all night wanting to say something. To cut their time, I'm shocked. And then to turn around and say that you don't even want to hear that the people who are watching on television, the people who are sitting here in the audience, don't have a chance to even hear facts in a manner. I'm speechless. So I'm going to come and say to you that I have to think that Mr. Millman was right, that I don't think that this is a fair organization to both the landlords and the tenants. I think that the words that you use, the actions that you take, are proving differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Next speaker we have is Pat Kramer. Mr. Kramer, you'll have 2 minutes when you're ready.
My comments will be brief. I was certainly surprised. I thought Costa-Hawkins was a settled issue. I was very surprised. I don't know if you remember the bad old days of rent control, the bad old days of what it was prior to Costa-Hawkins. Nobody could find a unit, and that was the deal. No, there were signs. I mean, there was discrimination. If there was a sign, you'd have 50 people show up. You'd end up taking the highest income people. You rent it as is. I think it's progress going to the bad old days. I was going to talk a different format, but one of the things you should think about are exclusions. I'm not sure if the bill is intended to cover condos. Owners are not necessarily wealthy, but they do rent their units out. Maybe there's a drop in price. They want to rent it until they can recoup the price. Maybe they have someone in a convalescent home. They need to rent it out to cover care. So I would recommend that you put in your resolution exempt condos so that you don't really hurt a lot of people that really can't afford to have $7 increases. They're all going to be impacted by the Costa-Hawkins or by earthquake retrofit. That's a heavy one. It's $100,000 for a building, maybe $50,000. Anyway, small owners don't have the funds. This a kiss of death. I have units at $525. Followed the law, Costa-Hawkins, for 20 years. I followed the law 20 years before that. My tenants have been there 35 years. They're paying $525 now. They're paying $54. I'm not planning on renting those units at $500. What you're like the butcher, sell hamburger for a penny a pound. You won't have any. Your unintended consequences are going to be, you're not going to have these units available for low-income tenants. You're going to lose the whole building, and that's the decision. Owners don't want to go out of business, but they will if they're forced to rent.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer.
Thank you.
I now have Peter, Borison. You will have 2 minutes when you are ready.
Okay, I'm a long-term Santa Monica resident with 2 children. I love the city, but I didn't love it in the 1980s. It seemed like all the apartment buildings were decrepit slums with peeling paint and dirt yards with no apartments to rent. I don't want my children to grow up in a city like that. I want Santa Monica to stay the attractive city it's become. Back then, rent control kept rents so low, apartment building owners couldn't maintain them, and many buildings were virtually abandoned. Santa Monica deserved its nickname of Skid Row on Sea. Talk to those who lived here then to hear the truth about vacancy control. Renters may be happy until they find it is impossible to rent a pre-1979 apartment, and the prices of the newer ones have jumped. That is what price caps do when applied to any commodity. And back then, landlords would often keep low-rent apartments empty. And when one of those super cheap apartments did come available, there'd be hundreds scrambling to rent it. The apartments often went to somebody who was on the inside, who was in no way deserving of this huge enforced gift. Then the landlords couldn't survive, so there was a demolition derby of their buildings to replace them with condos. Then California banned vacancy control, and owners could live with a few low-rent tenants rather than an entire building of low-rent tenants, which it would otherwise become. Thus, passing AB 1506 will greatly imperil the very tenants it is claimed to protect. Should 1506 become law, then say hello again to Skid Row on Sea, rental fraud, higher free market rents, and demolition derby number 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrington. I now have 2 minutes for Mr. Michael Millman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me debunk a fallacy offered by the leadership on this dais. Here's the situation. We're not obscenely rich because we have vacancy decontrol and market rents. My family have 11 buildings, 1 in Santa Monica. 2 of my most precious, dearest, terrific tenants are long-term, 25 tenant, paying a lot less rent than everybody else in the building, and I love them dearly. And I'm happy to keep them in the building because the market rent tenants, and I don't rent at market, everyone knows that, I rent below market, keeps the building in the black so that I can make their life perfect without putting any pressure on them. They're protected under rent control, and the other, 12 tenants that pay higher rent cover the roof, the landscaping, the earthquake retrofit I'll have to do, the plumbing, the electrical, or whatever I need to do, and everybody's happy. Costa Hawkins is the lifeline in the rescuing of so many rent burden long-term tenants who have been there 20 to 30 years, and we're happy to have them. We don't resent them. We treasure them. We honor them, but we have a lot of money to cover the building because of Costa Hawkins. You're going to kill off those people that we have been protecting, preserving, because we make money off of those vacancy controls. And I don't rent at market. Everyone knows that. And everyone in this room knows Michael Millman's family never charges a rent increase every year. We tell the tenants, if it's a hardship, you don't have to pay it. I have never charged a rent increase when they wanted. And Michael Millman